It's not safe out here. It's wondrous, with treasures to satiate desires both subtle and gross. But it's not for the timid. Hi everyone and welcome back to the Path to 10k. I'm Boomer, and in the second part of this series what we're going to look at are personal skills, and we're also going to look at duty officer assignments, so we're going to be able to look into a couple of builds as well. We're still back with the Thunderchild here. We've not done too much to her. Not really done anything spectacular at the moment. She is still extremely green thanks to the Riemann shield, but you know, they do like to add certain things into this game. But anyway, what I thought we'd start with are personal skills or your space abilities. So I've got mine up here, and generally if you're looking for a DPS build, virtually all the same abilities are needed no matter what your build is, with the exception of a couple of really fringe cases. For example, here you'll see that I have no points spent in Starship projectile weapons or projectile weapon specialization. The reason for that is that I do not intend to use projectile weapons, but obviously if you are on a torpedo boat, for example, you will want these, and that's one of the reasons I suppose why torpedo boats aren't really that popular, is because you have to retech your whole skill tree, and that costs Zen in order to do that. I sometimes feel that it would be a nice thing if they let us have two skill trees, you know, not necessarily kind of like they do with the intelligence and command specializations that they do now. I feel like it would be nice to be able to have two builds of your character, but especially because you're limited in this way due to how many points you can spend. But I guess that they decided that this was the best way. So anyway, the ones that you pretty much always want to have are Starship attack patterns, because you're pretty much always going to use either attack pattern beta or omega in a build, so you're going to want it as good as possible, giving the maximum buff possible. If you're a tactical officer, you will definitely want this because you will have attack pattern alpha as one of your captain abilities, so therefore you get the bonus from this anyway. Starship weapons training just gives you a damage boost across the board. It's level 1, you want that. Starship energy weapons improves energy weapon damage, and for the most part you are going to be using energy weapons in this game. Projectiles tend to be a one-off, if that. Generally the only projectiles that I see a lot of are the gravimetric torpedo and the neutronic torpedo. The only reason for that is that they have side effects which are seriously good. It's not the actual impact of the torpedo. You sometimes see heavy plasmas, but they're off fighters and they're generally not great. Also, you tend to put as much as you can into energy weapon specialization, because this increases your critical hit and your severity, which is what is going to contribute to a lot of your DPS, is how often you critically hit and how hard you hit when you critically hit. You'll see at the moment on the Thunderchild I actually haven't equipped anything yet, and I have sort of 10 and 76 as crit chance. If you're looking for a pure out DPS build as a Federation player, you probably want crit chance somewhere around 20 and crit severity somewhere around 100 to 120. Which is definitely possible, and that's without taking into account your weapon modifiers. If you're playing as a Romulan, congratulations, you're playing the Broken class. You can get crit chance up to sort of 30% and crit severity even higher at that point. But that's due to the duty officers. That's due to Romulan bridge officers, which can all have the superior Romulan operative trait, which gives you, I think, 2.5% crit chance. The only way the other two factions have access to that is through the embassy and only on tactical officers, whereas Romulans can just get them across the board. So, you know, your bridge officers give you 12.5% crit before you go anywhere, basically, on that front. So, you know, pretty big advantage the Romulans have in terms of that, and that's why pretty much most high DPSs are Romulans, especially considering the Romulans get the most powerful aggressive ship in the Scimitar as well. So, you know, you're kind of at a disadvantage when you're playing a Fed or a KDF in terms of the damage you can put out. But hey ho, enough complaining about that. We will carry on at this point. So, back to the skills. The other ones that I would suggest that you get are Warp Core Efficiency, which improves all of your ship's power levels. You're going to need that a lot. Also Starship EPS systems, because that increases power transfer rate, and if you're using emergency power to shields and emergency power to weapons, which pretty much all builds are, you are going to want to use this an awful lot. So this is one that you're going to use an awful lot. Warp Core Potential. Warp Core Potential is also, I don't know how many people use that max, but I use that quite a lot as well. And in science abilities, the ones that you generally want to do are flow capacitors, but the reason that you want to do flow capacitors is because of one of the consoles in the game. It's not because you want to buff your science ability. So I would do that because it's an early ability for you, but don't expect it to be super useful to you until you get massive endgame kit. Because the kit that you will want, if I can just get it, the thing that you will want, although you won't be able to get it immediately, is not that one. That one's rubbish that I just put on. It's here somewhere. Is that it? Yeah. That's the one that you are going to want. That's the Plasmonic Leech, and it steals the power of whatever you shoot at. So obviously you beam array fire at will and then take a load of power from it. And this is one of the ways that you get power back from. This is the ways that you can get power back from your beam array fire at will. There is one slight problem, that Plasmonic Leech is currently going for more than most people's firstborn sons are worth on the exchange. So that is a bit unfortunate that, you know, if you're early in the game, you are probably not going to be able to afford one of these. I would suggest pretty much following my, once we get you to 10k energy credits, 10k damage, I would actually recommend you follow my energy credit grinding guide for a couple of weeks or so, and then just buy yourself a Plasmonic Leech, because you will need a Plasmonic Leech if you want to be doing sort of higher end builds, because it's pretty much the one thing that everyone agrees that you have to have on a high-end build, because it's how you keep your weapon power high. So that's where you end up putting skills into flow capacitors. Some people suggest putting 6 points in driver coil. I actually put 9 because I got fed up of hanging around in space, but the rest of my skills probably aren't completely optimal. I might want a little bit more in weapon performance. I might want a little bit more in starship sensors, but overall I think that I've got the skills pretty much down as far as this goes. Really, these four are the humongous ones that you absolutely need, followed by the warp core efficiency and EPS systems. You definitely need those. So got the personal skills down. Moving on to something else which you can get, which are traits. Now, some traits are unlocked while you play through the game. Others are just part of being your character. You'll notice at the moment that I don't have any of my space traits equipped because I was playing Bug Hunt Elite last night, so I pretty much just stuck every ground ability I had on. So we'll have a look at the ones I get. As a human, I get accurate. That's just basically a boost to your accuracy. Accuracy is weird. In PvP it matters a lot more than PvE, but PvP is kind of dead for this game. Now there is something called accuracy overflow, which is where your bonus accuracy overflows into your critical hit chance, but nobody seems to know how it works. So therefore we are just saying high accuracy is fine, but don't sweat over it, and don't go looking for like accuracy times 3 modifiers, because crit hit and crit damage are just better on that front. Astrophysicist is because I'm a scientist. It gives me a boost to sensors, flow capacitors and particle generator. Really big deal, that one, for a science captain. As a tactical captain you'll have different ones. Flow capacitors is my draining, so I have I will probably use a plasmonic leech. Sensors gives me a really big buff when I use sensor scan. You can see it gives everything a huge damage resistance debuff. And stealth, again, not a big deal in this game. Nothing in PvE uses stealth really. Beam barrage I got because I have level 15 in beams, so you more than likely won't have that. But it's just it grants a beam damage skill, so it gives you a bit more. Conservation of energy, this is another science trait, gives me a bonus to exotic damage when I'm shot at. Elusive, space trait, gives you defense, basically makes you harder to hit, which is it's not that useful in a cruiser, but in an escort, that extra defense will mean that you don't get hit as much. Helmsman, this is a trait that you actually get, I believe, from the Romulan lockbox, if I'm correct. It's a space trait that gives you an increase to turn rate, and it cools down your evasive maneuvers by 10 seconds, so it's really good. Other ones that I have. Techie, I think this is a human one. It just gives you a big boost to hull repair. Warp Theorist, this is a science one, I believe, gives you more warp core potential and EPS, so that's super good. Because we've already mentioned that those are 2 of the abilities that you really want to max out. And finally I've got Photonic Capacitor, which is what I get for being a science captain, which means that my science abilities recharge my photonic fleet, which if I find here, it's down here somewhere. Apparently I haven't. Oh, there it is. Yeah, it allows me to summon some holographic ships that fight for me, so that's an increase in DPS doing that. So they're traits. Starship traits, you only get these when you have a tier 6 ship, or you level up a ship to level up a tier 6 ship. Unfortunately, I don't have the 2 big ones, which are, reciprocity, is it, or something like that? Reciprocality or something like that. That gives you, whenever you are missed by your opponent, it gives you, it cools down your tactical abilities. So if you're in a really fast ship that can grab a ton of aggro, you will have your tactical abilities pretty much on global, well, I'm not sure if the correct term's global, but you'll have them on their internal cooldown, which we will come to very shortly. The other one is All Hands on Deck, which is part of the new Tier 6 Federation Tactical Battle Cruiser. I think that's whenever you use a tactical ability, it cools down your science abilities. That thing's just ridiculous. I'm pretty sure, I would not be surprised if that trait is nerfed, because from what I'm hearing on Reddit and various other places is that thing just basically puts any other trait to complete and utter shame, and you just end up splattering everything in path with everything you might need on global cooldown. Space reputations, they're what you get from the reputation arcs with each of the alliances: Undine, Romulus, Nukara and Task Force Omega. The ones that people tend to use at the moment, probably quite rightly, are Precision, which gives you, I believe, a 4% boost to your critical hit chance. Advanced Targeting System, which gives you a 16% buff to your critical severity. The one that pretty much always gets used is the configuration offense for auxiliary power, which is why pretty much everyone buffs auxiliary power. It's something I didn't really mention in the last build, but what I really should do, I should lock weapons at 100%, decrease shields a bit, lock it, decrease engines, and that will give me an auxiliary boost. I'll just save that, go to 1. It puts my auxiliary now up to about 79, and that will give me a boost to offense as well. Gives me a sort of gives me a boost to how much damage I'm doing. You can't actually see it here, but believe me, the configuration offense really works. It's really, really strong, and that's generally what most people are using. I'm using, or at least on my science builds, when I have a big thing, I'm actually using the configuration defense. But I think that what a lot of people are using as well is, if we get rid of that, what many people are beginning to use is enhanced rending shots. And what that does is it gives you a 1% critical chance every time your ship fires a weapon until you critically hit, and then it resets. So it just increases your chance of critical hitting an absolute ton. If we come back here, you do see my hull has dropped a little bit and my shields have dropped a little bit because of the and my resists have really gone through the floor. But the fact is that I probably the resists going through the floor are a little bit worrying to me when doing that, which is why I've actually used the configuration defense as well. But however, with all the heals that I have, and given the fact that most of the things in the game just utterly destroy you if they hit you, certainly if they're on advanced, or in advanced, if your shields are down, you ain't surviving more than 2 or 3 shots anyway. I think that it might be worth it just to do that. But for me, it's between the rending shots and the configuration defense. It depends how much you want to play, how you play the way you do, basically. Active reputation, this is pretty much the same across the board. A quantum singularity manipulator using a cloak power. Cloaks are always useful. It gives you a huge boost to your science stats, so that's all your flow capacitors, all your particle generators, that sort of thing. And after 3 seconds it cloaks your ship, and you can fire weapons while you're cloaked, which gives you, I think it gives you a bonus to critical hit and damage as well. So, there's some pretty cool stuff going on there. Now, I'm not going to go too much further on this. I also have the refracting Tetrion Cascade because that increases DPS as well. So, I'm not going to go too much further on that. What I'm going to do at this point is we're going to investigate a few builds using duty officers. I'm going to start with what I have here. Now, considering I can activate most of my abilities, this actually makes things useful. So let's just stop for a minute. Now, what I want to show you here is basically you can bind macros to keys, and that's something that I will be showing later on. But first thing we've got to do is understand how some abilities work and how they're tied together. Now, you can see that I have these 3 lined up. Let's look at my Lieutenant Commander Tactical for a start. I have Tac Team, Attack Pattern Beta, and Beam Away Fire at Will 3. Now, what I would ideally want to do if I were going to Alpha Strike would be to activate all 3 of them. However, if I'm going to go, in order to do that, I would need to hit Shift 4, Shift 5, and Shift 6 here. Now, this isn't how my things are set up normally, but I'm going to do it this way just to show off something. Let's try and do that now. So I'm going to go 4, 5, 6. And you'll actually see that it hovered over Attack Pattern Beta there and then missed it and went straight over to Beam Array Fire at Will 3. The reason for this happening isn't actually the fact that the game is laggy as hell, although that does enter into it somewhere. Whenever you activate an ability, there's always a little bit of a cooldown between it activating and then you being able to activate another ability. So simply spamming your abilities is not going to work. You'll also notice, oh, what have I got there? A reverse power drain, whatever that is. Oh well, never mind. So what you'll actually see... That's odd. I don't. Oh, is it because I'm? Yes, it's because I'm in reverse. That's why it's doing. That's why it's doing that. And I've activated full impulse, which will make it even worse. But anyway, what else I need to show you on this front? We could try going 654. How does that work? And that actually works, which is a strange one. Now, there is a global cooldown going on, but some global cooldowns, that 1 second cooldown you saw, are actually longer than others. And randomly, Tactical Team is one that has one of the longer cooldowns for some reason. I'm not too sure why that is the case, but I usually, in this case, if I'm setting up my hotkeys down here, I will put Tac Team as the last one that I activate, due to the fact that, you know, if let's just do that 4, 5, 6 again, you'll see it took longer for Tactical Team to activate, and because of that I missed Attack Pattern Beta when I did that. So that's just one little, that is just a little tip there that we'll show off. Now, some of these abilities that you can see here have shared cooldown. We'll let everything reset here, and then you can see what I mean by that. So if I activate my Tactical Team again here, I'm just going to click on it to activate it, you'll notice that after the lag basically to get it going, this version of Tactical Team goes on 15-second cooldown. 15-second cooldown is generally what it is for, generally what it becomes for 2 abilities. Similarly, if I activate Beam Ray Fire at Will 3 here, this one actually goes on cooldown for 20 seconds. Because that's how long Beam Ray Fire at Will lasts. So if it was on 15-second cooldown, you could just perma put it up. So Beam Ray Fire at Will is on a little bit of a longer cooldown. You can't affect these cooldowns. However, you can see how we've got this rotating motion. You can affect the cooldowns when it's rotating. Other ones that share abilities, what actually used to happen, the reason you can stack up teams like this, all teams used to affect each other. So if you use Tactical Teams, it will put Engineering Team and Science Team on cooldown. It doesn't do that anymore. Other shared cooldown, we have Emergency Power to Shields here. Notice my shield power going up when I do that. That will put Emergency Power to Weapons on cooldown for 15 seconds. And again, there's nothing we can do to alter this natural cooldown. It's just what happens. But we can now activate Emergency Power to Weapons. You see my weapon power caps out at 125, and now they're both on a winding down cooldown until they go down. Now, Emergency Power to Weapons lasts for 30 seconds, which is quite a long time. You'll see that Emergency Power to Shields has only just dropped off there, and Emergency Power to Weapons is still on, and it'll be, and now we can hit Emergency Power to Shields again, and it goes back on its 45-second cooldown. And this is pretty much the loop that ends up happening, and you can actually see, I'll let you know why that happened very shortly, why everything spiked up like that. That's actually part of the build. I forgot that duty officers are involved here. Nothing else on the ship shares a cooldown, so we just have to be aware of these shared cooldowns. It doesn't mean that I can go Beam Ray Fire at Will 3, Beam Ray Fire at Will 2, Attack Pattern Beta and just go nuts. You can't do that. But what makes things interesting is when you have active duty officers. So let's just remove the ones that I had before, and you'll be able to see why I spiked as much as I did at that point. So what I'm going to go first is what's called a Drake build. This is a little bit of a more expensive build than the other build that I want to show you. But what this one does, it shortens the cooldown time between Emergency Power to Weapons and Shields. So they're constantly on their 15-second cooldown. So what you need for that is you need a damage control engineer. I actually have many of them, fortunately. One of them you can replicate yourself, which is the emergency engineering hologram. The other ones you're just going to have to get for yourself, but blue ones and green ones will do you okay in the meantime. Somehow I managed to get 2 blue emergency engineering holograms. I have no idea how that happened. But if we put him on active duty and we'll put the other 2, can you tell I've used this build before by the fact that I've got bound damage control engineers? So we've got 3 of our damage control engineers on there. That's the maximum you can have of any one type. And each of them has the ability that has a 35% chance to reduce time by 30%. Now this is not an exclusive stack. What this is that it's a 65% chance to miss, then a 65% chance to miss, and a 65% chance to miss, and it's 1 minus 60. It's basically 1 minus 65% cubed is your chance to hit. I think it's something around 79% is your chance to get the proc. So basically, let's see what happens here. I'll activate emergency power to shields, and you'll see that it clicked immediately down to 30 seconds. So my duty officers worked at that point. So my emergency power to shields, you can see, is on for 18 seconds, and it's only got another couple of seconds. We hit emergency power to weapons, and it didn't proc, which is unfortunate there. But by the time it comes round again, we'll be able to hit emergency power to shields again. And you can see it actually go on global there. Hit it again, and you'll see it actually, the proc hit there, so it cooled down both of them. And emergency power to weapons is going to be back up again very shortly. We're going to have about a 2 or 3 second gap in this. So hit it again, it procs again. Now you'll notice this one didn't change. It's now gone onto the vertical line. That's because it's on global. That's because it goes on to global cooldown. It can't go lower than that. But you can actually see now I've got both of my abilities constantly up, and that is basically what the Drake ship is aiming to do, is to keep both of these abilities up pretty much constantly. Sometimes you will get a very small skip like I am here, but it's only for a couple of seconds while things cool down, and you end up in a good place, apart from the fact that I'm missing 80% chances constantly here. But you can see why this build works, because you're constantly at really high shield and energy weapons, so shield and energy levels, so therefore you end up in a really nice spot with that. Now, if I had 2 copies of Attack Pattern Beta, I would use a... oops, didn't mean to do that. I would use a seriously expensive duty officer. But what I would recommend you do, you can really fill this area with anything that you would want. Let's just see, what do we have here? Con officers, for example. I mean, I've got one of the really expensive con officers here called whatever, the Cardassian version's called Zmok. It reduces the recharging time for your attack patterns. If I had 2 attack patterns, or I had a beta and an omega, I would use that on this build, because then what that allows you to do really easily is sync up your 2 attack patterns. All attack patterns share a cooldown, so therefore again you want them up as fast as possible, and you can sync your fire at will and your attack patterns together, and that's how you get maximum damage out of it. I don't really think that there are a couple. I mean, you can really choose exactly what you want on this build now. That is the most important Drake part. Actually, no, I do apologise. There is one other one you will want, and that is a Warp Core Engineer. And what this does, chance of temporarily improving your ship's weapons, shields, engines and auxiliary power on use of any emergency power ability. 20% chance it gives you a buff to all your power levels of 25%. Now, you actually saw, those of you who are eagle-eyed, you will have seen when I was using the emergency powers before that my weapon energy didn't come down for absolutely ages, and that's because this guy procced, and he gave me plus 25 to everything. So we put emergency power to shields on. He doesn't proc, but we'll wait until he does proc, and you'll be able to see what actually happens. Hopefully it won't take too long. But really, this guy is super, super powerful. He gets all your weapon system. There you go. He's just procced. Auxiliary went over 100. Shields have gone over 100. And this is without, don't forget, this is without using a plasmonic leech. If you use a plasmonic leech in addition to this, you end up with all 4 of your power levels being over 100 a lot of the time, and that's where other sort of late game kit comes in, and a lot of the advanced, the super advanced builds are kind of based around this setup, where you have your attack patterns on low cooldown, you have your emergency power to weapons and shields on low cooldown, you have boost to your power, you boost your power a ton, and they have warp cores with an ability called AMP, which gives you a flat damage bonus for all of your power levels that are over 75. So you can see how everything sort of, most of this is to do with what's called with synergizing your build more than anything else. You're looking to get everything that you have working together. So let's have a look at another build quickly, and this is the one that I imagine that most people who are in cruisers will use if you're engineering, because cruisers' downside is they don't have a huge amount of tactical spaces. You know, they don't have the ability to put, usually what I would say is if you have 6, I believe the conventional wisdom is, if you have 6 tactical spots or higher, you're better off going with a Drake build. If you have lower, you're better off going with what I'm about to do here, which is called an auxiliary to battery build. So what I'm going to do is use this, it's not her who's on, it's this one. I'm going to use this engineer. I'm going to change her secondary ability to auxiliary to emergency battery, and you'll see why very shortly. So it's that one, an auxiliary to emergency battery. Now, the usual version of this build runs with 2 copies of auxiliary to emergency battery, but as we've discussed, the event Odyssey is crap, so I can't do that without giving up one of these 2 abilities to get a second auxiliary to battery, and I really don't want to do that. So I might run this build with just 1 and just do it that way. So without any officers equipped, you hit auxiliary to battery, it lowers your auxiliary power and boosts up all your other power levels. It's, you know, that's not bad. It does cack your auxiliary power a little bit, and you're going to be eating auxiliary batteries quite a lot if you want to use auxiliary power, but that's pretty much what that does. Now, the interesting bit, and I hit the wrong key. Now the interesting bit, if you get technicians involved, who I have quite a few of actually, for those of you who are worried about getting technicians, because technicians cost about 15 million energy credits on the exchange, this is the technician you want. He, she, whatever, is available on the support mission in the Bertrand Nebula, which is in the oh god, what's it called? Is it Gamma Orionis sector? It's where the Borg come in. That is where you can get this person from the support mission. If you critical it, you will get this officer and purple technician, which is what you want. Failing that, I believe I think it's this guy, is available from the CXP. I think if you level, it might be engineering or diplomacy, you can buy him, you can get him for free from Earth space dock. So there are plenty of ways of getting technicians besides buying them for 15 million on the exchange, so don't worry too much about that. So and you'll see when I look at the ability, recharge time for all bridge officer abilities is reduced when using an auxiliary to emergency battery, 10%. And these guys do stack. So if we put them all on active, if we put 3 of them on active duty, you will note, and I'll activate some abilities just because I can. Let's just activate all of these. Do that. Yep. Hit auxiliary to battery, and everything ticks down. So you get everything on a much shorter cooldown. The standard build of auxiliary to battery, as I said, runs 2 copies of auxiliary batteries, because you'll have a lieutenant engineering over here with a second copy, and what that does, it reduces the cooldown on auxiliary to battery itself, so therefore you will end up with every single thing on your tray will be on vertical bar cooldown. So, you know, do the same again, auxiliary to battery, and you get that cooldown there. So pretty awesome. Again, I would be quite happy to put a warp core engineer on here as well, just for the power level boost. The one thing that you do lose a lot of with this build, you lose a lot of auxiliary power. So your science, that's the disadvantage of this build, that your science abilities tend to be pretty rubbish when you do this build. So I think that it's pretty much perfect for this ship, because it has like 2 very early science abilities. But if you're looking at building a Gravwell or a Tychon's Rift style ship, you will need high auxiliary power, which means the auxiliary to battery build is probably not good for you. You will more than likely want to use the Drake style build that I showed earlier. There are many other builds as well. I'll just bring the Dralafi back, not the Dralafi, I'll just bring the Volgograd back so you can see the build I'm running on her. And a lot of it, a huge amount of it is reducing the cooldown on your stuff. It's all about reducing cooldowns. So if we come back to the Volgograd, you can see I've got some quite nice shiny stuff on it at the moment. Actually, I'm interested to see what her stats are now I've got now I've changed traits. Shields have dropped a bit, hulls dropped a bit, resistances are a bit shocking. Not too sure. If I move, does that change anything? No, it doesn't. It just ups my defense a little bit. Okay, so let's have a look at the duty officers I'm using here. Yes, I need to load my build. Loadout. That's the one. And yeah, you'll notice it's called Mad. That's because I've basically gone ape for tactical abilities. This isn't the... I think I use a slightly different build now. I think I use the particle generator one now. That has a couple of engineering abilities up here. It actually has the Drake abilities, the emergency power to weapons and shields. So if we come up here, what have I got? I have 3 deflector officers, and they are very similar. Reduce the time for all deflector abilities to recharge after their use. So this is the equivalent of the damage control engineer. So the deflector abilities I have are Tychon's Rift and Gravity Well. I also have the Breen Energy Drain, which is a deflector ability as well. Unfortunately, tractor beams aren't a deflector ability, but hey ho, no problem. And what else do I have? I have this guy who turns your tractor beam repulsor into a pull rather than a push, and I think it also gives you a little bit... Sorry, a push... Yeah, it's a pull rather than a push, and I think it gives you a little bit more... it might give you a little bit more damage, not too sure, but this guy's expensive, so you don't necessarily have to have him. I just have him on this particular build. Also, if you thought power levels were good using the damage control engineer, watch this. Yep, that was weapon power going up to over 150, and that's an intelligence ability called Override Subsystem Safeties. It gives you a huge power boost, which you then start losing due to the fact that you bust half your subsystems, and then one of your subsystems randomly fails for 4 seconds, which happened to be weapons there, but it didn't actually fail that way. It didn't fail for 4 seconds. It definitely didn't do that. So let's have a look at the other ones that I'm using. I'm using a gravimetric scientist to generate an aftershock Tychon's Rift. I'm actually using a diplomat here, which will give me a... which means that my opponents get a weapon energy drain when I use a team abilities. It has a 25% chance to give a huge weapon debuff when I'm actually attacked, which is quite cool. That's pretty cool. The other build that I am currently using with this ship, because this build's very glass cannony, so I don't use it much. I'm not using it as much. I use this, which is the particle generator style build. Still got the OSS, but I've now got my emergency power to shields on and weapons on this side. I don't have the cooldowns, but I don't have the cooldown engineers, but they are still super good abilities. I've also got an extra heal over here because my auxiliary power is usually so high that I am, I get really big heals with that. You can see I still have the damage control engineer. I actually put the warp core engineer. I put him on as well, or her. Her, it's female. Put her on as well because again, big buff to power, and this build is basically based around getting as much power as you possibly can from your build. So that's basically where we're going. So that's a couple of example builds for you and what sort of skills that you're going to want to do with your ships. Next time, what I am also going to do, that I feel like there's something I am missing out on a little bit here. I'm sure you guys will remind me on that front. Oh yeah, just going back to skills very quickly. Because I'm a scientist, I put a lot of points into particle generators because that's where my damage from Titan's Rift and Gravity Well and Tractor Beam and everything else, Tractor Beam Repulsor comes from and all that sort of stuff. I've also put a lot in Graviton generators just so I've got a massive Gravity Well 3, and it does unlock Gravity Well 3 as well having that, so that's it. Oh yes, the one thing I can't really do or haven't really done as part of this series so far is look into captain abilities. That's because they change based on whether you're an engineer, a scientist or a tactical captain. If you're a tactical captain, what you're often going to want to do is use attack pattern alpha as your major damage buff, but you also have a ability called go down firing, which gives you a big damage buff if you're below 50% health. And what this so what you'll see with a lot of tactical captains is, especially on something like ISA, what they will do is they'll charge the Borg cube at the beginning, destroy it, and then wait for it to blow up, and that will knock them below 50% health, and then you'll be able to activate go down firing and attack pattern alpha and just wipe out anything that's in front of you. But we'll get on to timing of abilities and things like that a little bit later. I wanted to introduce the basics of a build more than anything else at this point. So I believe that if you're going to make a ship build, you're going to want to go for one of those two sort of abilities right off the start. If you're a science vessel, then you might go for this third one that I'm showing here, just so you can get like the bigger gravity wells going on. I think that they're pretty much the three ways that you're going to want to build, at least at the beginning. You can play around with what you want, and don't think that you have to use purple officers to get to 10k DPS. You really don't. You can use green and blue ones. You obviously won't be as effective as someone with purple, but you won't have spent millions of days grinding or 30 million energy credits on whatever duty officer you need. And once you've got to 10k, you'll be able to follow the energy credit guide that I have, and you'll be able to just be overloaded with money. But that is it for part 2 of the Path to 10k, guys. Hope you have enjoyed it, and next time we will be going into some example STFs of where things went right and where things went spectacularly wrong, and we'll see what we can do in order to maximize what we are doing and maximize our effectiveness. So until then, guys, hope you've enjoyed. This is Boomer, and I'll see you next time.